Hello and welcome. We have started the recording. We'll call the meeting to order very shortly. Just getting a few technological issues handled. Of note, due to family illnesses, 2 of our board members are participating virtually. So we should be able to hear their comments through the sound system here. And if not, we'll figure out how to do that. Joe or Marnie, one of you want to speak up real quick so we can see if we can hear?
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear it somewhat, so I think we're good. So we'll, as usual, we will wait a couple of minutes as folks online join in the meeting.
Brooke, I'm wondering, Christy, can you switch it to gallery view so that our other board members will show up on the screen?
Great idea.
For you.
Okay, it looks like our numbers online have steadied, so that should be who we have for now. We have 8 folks online, and I'd say we've got, I don't know, 30 odd here in the room, which is wonderful, including a large number of our students and families for a presentation, which I'm very excited for. So we will start with, I call this meeting of the South Whidbey School Board number 206 to order. We'll now move along to Marnie Jackson for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Brooke. South Whidbey School District acknowledges that we gather on the ancestral homelands, originally known as Chocolchi in the Shutzid, of the coastal Salish peoples, on the lands of the Lower Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial, who have hunted, fished, and gathered here, and who have taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connections with the land and water. Please join us in expressing our deepest respect for the Indigenous people of this territory and our gratitude for their enduring care and protection of this land, which we currently occupy and share through the Treaty of Point Elliott, signed by 82 tribes in Mukilteo on January 22nd, 1855. And with that said, I want to just again remind us that this reading of the land acknowledgement, I hope it never becomes habitual. I hope we never become habituated to reading it without thinking and feeling about its implications. And I hope that we take this as an invitation into deeper learning and more embodied healing in relationship with land and people. Thank you.
Thank you, Marnie, particularly for that reminder that anything that we read regularly should be something that we think about deeply each time we do so. Thank you very much. Just as a note, since we are in a hybrid format, we'll take public comment from those in person first. If you would like to make a public comment, please sign up on the sign-up sheet at the back of the room. If you would like to make public comment as an online participant, please use the Q&A function to enter your name, full name and location, and then that will let us know that you want to make a comment, and then you can take your time typing up the actual comment that you would like read on your behalf. We'll now move on, and are there any objections to the agenda and minutes as presented? Hearing none, the agenda and minutes as presented are approved. We're going to move directly on to our presentations now, since we have so many students here to present. Mrs. Richards, please, the floor is yours, and the students.
Just wanted to say how very proud I am that these students and our fourth grade teachers, the students have really driven this entire project, as you'll hear from them tonight. So go ahead and.
Hi, we are Ella, and we want to talk to you about our fourth grade service project, Art from the Heart. Art from the Heart is an art sale featuring art made by us, the fourth graders of South Whidbey Elementary School. We are selling our art to help out organizations that help the homeless. We have learned a lot about homelessness, and we want to help make a difference in people's lives.
Here are some things that we learned about homelessness. People become homeless for many different reasons. A lot of homeless people are children. Homelessness has gotten worse on Whidbey Island.
Homeless people deserve to be treated with kindness. Many students at our school have experienced homelessness. We are very excited about the art we have created for the sale. Here are a few pieces of art we have made. The art you will buy will be framed nicely. It makes a wonderful gift for parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or anyone. We are asking for a minimum $10 donation for each art piece. You can always donate more. The Art from the Heart sale will be on Thursday, May 5th from 3 to 5 at the community room at elementary school. Everyone is welcome. We hope to see you there. Any questions?
Which room in the community center should we go to on that date? Oh, this one.
one.
Okay. All right. Got it. Thank you
Preview
for
room, yeah.
clarifying.
I've gotten the chance to talk to these students here during one of my visits, and it's just so wonderful to hear you, let me address you since you're standing right here, to hear you getting involved in your community. That's such a huge part of what I think makes South Whidbey School District so special, is the involvement between the schools and the community. And so the way that you've found something that you love and taken that opportunity to give back to your community through that is so amazing to me. And the fact that you came up with the idea to do it and you decided to do it, it blows me away. I'm continually impressed by the students in this school district. So thank you for setting such a wonderful example to not just our fellow students, but everyone in the community. And we will not be offended if parents want to duck out now. Thank you very much for joining us. Next on our agenda is a note that next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. And there's so very much we can say about these teachers, but we're actually going to wait until our board workshop because the governor has not yet issued his proclamation. It's coming, but we want to actually have that available to bring up and read when the time comes. So next week, if you see a teacher, say thanks. And we'll have more on that at our next meeting. So then the next item on the agenda is for our student board members and Director Green-Heron to talk to us about their time at the NSBA conference. So take it away. Getting the presentation up. Yep.
Okay, that sounds good.
while we're waiting, I'll just note that the folks at the back table there are many of our wonderful administrators. That this is often a question that comes up. So we've got assistant superintendent, principals, other members of the administration back there to provide expert witness when we need them.
All right.
Okay, so earlier this month, I was super honored to be able to attend the National School Board Association annual conference in San Diego from April 1st to the 4th. And during this conference, there was an immense amount of amazing opportunities. One in particular was being able to connect with other student board members, especially from the East Coast, because a lot of their structure of their position is a lot different than what's going on in our district, and kind of being able to benchmark and see where we're at. I was very inspired by seeing the work they've done. For example, a lot of the student board members from Maryland collaborate with their legislators on bills such as granting student board members votes. One of the student board members from, I think it was Baltimore County, is actually able to vote on policy. So that was really interesting to hear about. They also serve much bigger districts that range from couple 100,000. So being able to hear a little bit about how they campaign and going through every single campus instead of just the high school, which is an area I want to work on, is reaching out more to elementary students and middle school students, and kind of not just staying within high school students, and also hearing about how their campaign is months long. It's a very intense process. And their election process, they're actually voted on by the student body. And I know we're looking for a new student board member soon to kind of just like kind of evaluating the different election processes was interesting, as well as hearing about their student board member student advisory committee, where they actually have students come together and kind of discuss what they want the student board member to talk about in meetings, especially ranging from a wide campus, having people from individual campuses come together and kind of bring their thoughts together and recap before a board meeting is super important, and it's something I'm looking into, as well as hearing more about visits to campuses is something I want to improve on, especially to elementary school as well. So do you have anything else you want to add with connecting with the student board members?
Sure. So I think from a student board member perspective, we met student board members across the country. And what was fascinating for me was just how productive student board members can be when there are systems built around that position that sort of facilitate that. And I think Maryland is a really good example of that. Massachusetts is another good example. Maryland, they got full voting rights for all student board members across the state. That was something that the student board members led in the creation of that. California, their bill, I believe it's in the Senate now, but they're getting a lot done, and that's facilitated, of course, by student groups. So, and that was just fascinating to me to see that, to see how productive they can be. So I echo everything Audrey said. I found it fascinating from a perspective of our roles as student board members and how that ties into our work towards the district.
And then moving on to sessions I attended, so we'll have different ones. My favorite, I would have to say, is I was honored to be a presenter and be part of a panel in elevating student voice in K through 12 educational governance. And within this, we kind of talked about our roles as student board members, as well as how to bring student voice into discussion instead of just listening, and how to, make processes that were kind of seemed as an adult process, include students in that and hear their input. I also attended Leveling Up in a Rural Community, Learning for All to Bridge the Equity Gap. And in this session, I kind of realized a lot of struggles our district has, being isolated as an island and having a lot of access issues. So being able to kind of hear about how, I think it was a school in Alabama, they brought in a lot of trade school and CTE programs into their high school. And from this, they saw an immediate growth in their overall report as a district and students going into the workforce in college. So that was really fascinating to hear about. I also attended Empowering Excellence and Success Through Student Leadership, where I heard about an 8th grade student council that serves the superintendent. So kind of similar to a student board member council, but it consists of 8th graders, and they'd actually attend board meetings and kind of have a panel and then contribute to like meetings. So that was really interesting. Another session I attended was on board communication, and something personally I really liked out of this was having the minutes from multiple meetings being recapped in an e-report. Because as a student, it's really challenging to track down board docs and, you know, find specific minutes and find what's on the agenda. But just having an overview, say monthly, of what's going on in board meetings, I think is a great way to keep students connected and the community connected. I also attended a session on youth mental health resources. And it was kind of more on videos and educational tech resources for mental health. But I actually talked a lot about our Forefront suicide prevention training that's being led by high school students. And I actually had a few board members from other districts talk about wanting to look for that in their district. So I'm really happy I brought that up because I think it's a really great thing we're doing as a district. I also attended the National Education Association Principles for the Future of Assessment. So kind of reevaluating what state testing looks like and how to make it more equitable and really being able to reach different student populations and not just having it as a reflection. Because right now, I mean, I'm taking the SBAC test tomorrow, and it's really hard to sit for 3 hours of testing multiple times a week. And I think this is something a lot of students can share. And for everyone, it's not the perfect reflection of what they're getting out of the classroom. So within this session, there's a lot of talking about self-reflecting and kind of being able to benchmark where you are rather than having the state tell you where you are. Again, the Superintendent Student Council, I talked about that earlier. And then another session I attended is where a board was kind of recognizing some struggles they had, and they set 5 really clear priorities as part of their strategic plan. And then every single board meeting, they reevaluate these priorities and see where they're at, and just continuously re-implemented stuff and checked back in on things in the schools. And one of a priority was college and career ready curriculum. So they kind of reevaluated the district's curriculum as a whole, and found like certain grade levels in classes that needed to be fixed or reflected on. And then we also attended keynote sessions. I have to be honest, there was a few keynote sessions I wasn't the biggest fan of, just because I couldn't exactly find out how they connected directly to education. But one of them I really liked was Homeless to Harvard. And it was about a student who struggled in poverty and with parents dealing with drug addiction, and kind of finding access to education allowed her to, and being able to kind of immerse herself in education kind of helped her not move on, but I don't know, I found it really inspiring, and just access is crucial, and allowing equitable access to everyone and meeting their needs where they're at. And again, everything I put in this report is not what exactly I'm recommending the board to do or what the board should do as a whole. I'm just speaking as myself and pointing out things I found interesting. So thank you.
I would just add to that. I thought the Homeless to Harvard was absolutely fascinating from the importance of education perspective about how important access is. You said it exactly right. That was the big takeaway for me for all the keynote speakers, was that, and the rest of the keynotes were absolutely terrible, but that one was great.
Hi, can everybody hear me? So I was fortunate enough to be able to attend this conference with Sol and Audrey, and I aim to make my remarks short so that Sol can have his turn to share his remarks. So I tried to limit it to top 3 takeaways. I will mention not a takeaway, but my favorite part of the conference was seeing Audrey and Sol present about student voice at the panel that Audrey mentioned. It was really amazing to see their leadership not just at a district level and not just at a state level, but on the national stage. So really kudos to the two of them for what they've accomplished here in our district, and also for sharing their best practices with many other districts in the nation. Next slide. So similar to what Audrey said, these are notes from what the presenters had to say. This isn't necessarily me saying we should or shouldn't do this, or that we do or don't do this as a district. Next slide. I also attended the mental health supports talk that Audrey mentioned. So I'll just go quickly through this. That the American Academy of Pediatrics has declared a national emergency in child mental health. And the presenter talked about a number of resources for students, for parents, and for teachers. So I trust that our health professionals are well versed in mental health as well as physical health. And if they or anyone else would like more of these resources, I'm happy to share. Next slide. So this talk was very close to my heart as someone who loves data and science. Someone in Texas did a study that correlated certain facets of board governance with the performance of that district based on the Texas district ranking. And there were many different aspects, but these 5 were the most highly correlated aspects of a board. And so there are high expectations for all students to achieve a deep and shared understanding of the district's mission, vision, goals, strategic plan, a collaborative team and shared leadership, doing personal development that's based on research, and having a mindset of continuous improvement, similar to the way a sports team needs to train every day to reach their best. And then also a board that fairly and clearly evaluates their superintendent with no surprises at evaluation time. So it was good to see that these are a lot of things that we're already doing. Next slide. There was an entire series aimed at new board members, so I went to a lot of those talks. And this one was probably the most interesting. It was breaking down what is board policy. Board policy is really a way to create accountability by setting down the direction and intent of the board in writing. We can't just copy and paste our policy from up above, from a state or federal level. It has to be based on our local values here in South Whidbey. So there's a number of goals of policy. And an interesting idea I learned is that if there's too much policy, it sort of ties the hands of the superintendent because the policy becomes very prescriptive and tells them what to do. And if there isn't enough policy, the superintendent, it's unclear to them what success looks like. So there's a sweet spot for policy. And then a best practice I learned is that it's good to have a policy review process so that policies are reviewed on a cadence such that every policy can be reviewed during the duration of every director's term cycle, even though they're offsetting from each other. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I'll give 2 honorable mentions. I collected a lot of ideas about board self-evaluation and superintendent evaluation, including some sample evaluations that we can look to incorporate if we wish. And then lastly, there's a current Supreme Court case that had almost an entire session devoted to it. Let's, in our own backyard, that will really set precedents on the First Amendment balance between the separation of church and state and people's, free exercise and free speech and free will in an educational setting. So it will be interesting to see how the Supreme Court rules on that. So that's all I have, and I'll pass the mic to Sol.
Okay. Thank you. So overall, I thought that it was a very informative conference. It provided a lot of important information for board members, especially new board members. I felt like this is the perfect sort of training ground for new board members. So I would highly recommend it for new board members in the future. Unfortunately, I am graduating soon, painfully soon. So my focus was more on figuring out what the best what's the best way I can still contribute to the district and contribute to the systems that I participate in. That's what part of what we'll talk about at the workshop. And May 11th is, the role of the student board member, the election process, all of that. So I put a lot of effort into focusing on student board member issues rather than broad district level issues. It was a massive opportunity for me to connect with student board members from across the country. A few student board members that we learned a lot from were the members of the NSBMA, the National Student Board Member Association, and the CSBMA, the California Student Board Member Association. Both of those organizations provide services for student board members, and both of those had a lot of information to offer us. And all right. Okay, lessons taken back. So the most important thing that I learned, I felt that we could offer for our students was more mental health support. There are so many resources available, and the Cook Center did an excellent, I think you described it and Joe touched on it too, I forget the exact name of the session, but focusing on providing mental health support for students, for teens. And the Cook Center for Human Connections, learning about their work was quite interesting, and how useful they can be in providing resources to teens, and parents, and community members in figuring out what our students need. Okay, in terms of connections, opportunities for more integration and collaboration between schools. One of the areas where I feel like, and this is my personal opinion, but since we're an island, we tend to be sort of disconnected from other schools. We're also a district where we don't have a massive amount of schools. We're a smaller district, so we can be disconnected. However, there are a lot of opportunities, I feel, for our students to still be connected with other schools, with other groups. Clubs can find connections with other clubs, ASB and our sports teams, of course, but those are some examples. And I felt connection between schools, between different grade levels, is an important, something important we can provide our students. One of the greatest takeaways I had is that we are quite successful school district in many sort of newer goals that have been becoming more important to boards in the last couple of years. We tend to be succeeding in those goals more than many districts that I've seen, and that was reassuring, and I felt like that was very positive. That was everything that they didn't cover in much more detail, but overall quite an impactful conference.
Thank you, all three of you. I have lots of questions, but I'm going to save the majority of them, all of them, I think, for when we talk about student voice and student board members at our board workshop next month, because that's where they're really focused. Anyone else have, any other board members have questions for these three? Okay, thank you very much for bringing back that information to us and bringing back the knowledge and everything you learned. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with it. Next up is the Fairgrounds Workforce Housing Proposal. Mr. Gordon.
I'll bring up your presentation for you. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yes, please. Just because we do have people online who can't hear otherwise.
Right. Yeah, I'm here tonight to describe to you a workforce housing project that an unlikely an unlikely sort of small district or small taxing district has put forward, and that's the Port of South Whidbey. It wouldn't have been all that long ago that port districts couldn't even consider something like housing. It was not within the statute that created port districts, and it's not in what our allowable uses are for. So, but the rules have been changing, and some of the laws have been tested, and we're getting to the point where we can see that port districts could actually promote and maybe even create and maybe even own different types of housing if it was directly related to economic development. So what I want to describe to you tonight is not what most people would consider general affordable housing, and it's not going to solve a homeless problem. It's for folks that are more in the 80 to 120% of the mean income on South Whidbey. And that's like, I don't know, 50-some thousand or something. I don't have total specifics. A lot of these details are going to get worked out, but we're targeting workforce housing. So now I'd like to back up. Dr. Joe, can you just put the first slide up in the background while I ramble for a second?
It's up there.
It's up there. Okay. All right, good. Okay. So I've been a port commissioner for about, well, I'm on my 13th year. Before that, I was a Park and Rec District commissioner for almost 20 years. I've been here pretty much all my life. One of the things that I'm really proud of that I was able to push forward was the Port of South Whidbey taking over the fairgrounds. And it's actually become a great benefit to the community, to the fairgrounds, and to the Fair Association, I believe. You can ask any of those folks, but the public voted for us to take that over. But with that comes some baggage. And one of the probably most costly sets of baggage are we have concession stands that run right in along our sort of our main avenue going into the fairgrounds, and they're in really bad shape. So those buildings probably need to come down and get replaced. So along the lines, when we got thinking about how best to do that, we also, I have for many years tried to consider where best new housing would be for families, for younger, or not necessarily younger folks, but for people that are producers locally in our community. About 10 or 12 years ago, the port hired a firm to do a economic development study. And one of the things that came out of that was one of the biggest providers of jobs is the service industry here. I mean, you have a few big providers. I mean, you've got Whidbey Telecom and Nichols, and there's a list of a few. And then there are people, the school district, right? There are people, but then a lot of folks just are scattered throughout the whole of our district. Your district and ours are very similar in our boundaries in the service industry. And that's not going to change as the demographics here get older, and they are. I mean, you all do your own surveys and have paid to have. Okay, well, it might be worth sticking around then, huh? Okay, but anyway, the point is you could see that, and the other thing that you could see is you could see these kids graduating from high school and then disappear, because you have a certain amount of numbers of folks, and then from about 19 to 25, this was 10 years ago or 12, it dramatically went down, and they don't come back. Well, back then it was like in the 40s. But the point I'm trying to make is the two things that I believe keep them here. Oh, okay. Hey, see, you're adding to my data. This is great. Yeah. Okay. Look at the big drop, 18 to 29, 30 to 39. Here they're coming back, whether they had been here before or not. They're realizing either they can work from here somehow, they can afford a home here somehow, and they're coming back. But then look at the next couple of categories. Those people, which I'm in those categories, are going to need a service industry. And it doesn't matter whether it's the checker at the Star Store or whether it's a waiter or a waitress or somebody that works for my company in a small business digging a ditch or throwing a shovel of asphalt. We need service personnel. So I'm rambling too long. The shorter story here is because any expansion of multifamily requires more septic than most property around here has, and more water, and the infrastructure in Langley already exists. It's a fantastic place to provide a multifamily structure. And I think even the county commissioners are coming to that realization that what happened with growth management, good or bad, not going either way, is that the cities need to accept the density. And that was the goal. And to me, if we could put 15 to 20 units of very small units, either studios or one bedrooms, and we might be able to get a 2-bedroom or 2 in there, 15 to 20 of them in downtown Langley, darn near downtown Langley, where you can walk to the bus stop and you can walk downtown, and the impact of these folks, keeping these folks on the island, would be low, in that you're not creating a new traffic problem and you're not creating any other kind of volume issues, because you already have the city there, and the sewer is more than adequate. The water is adequate. So our idea, except for this picture, adequately sort of depicts the fact that this is, let's say everything went well, and this is 5-6 years from now, and we've done away with those concession stands. We rebuilt them, but on top of them, we have these apartments. Why don't you just flip to the next picture, Joe? I hope I can call you Joe. He's got a third one, but that's okay. This one is looking down that alley. But let's go to the third one. Yeah, okay, this is a good one. Okay, now you're inside the main, sort of the main drag that goes through, and you guys all must have gone to the fair. I mean, everybody's gone in there. We had curly fries. What? I mean, everybody's been there, right? I mean, I was there before I can hardly remember. And those concession stands were there when I was there, and I don't want to tell you how long ago that was. I mean, but the point is, if you look at the way this is designed, the idea would be to keep, I mean, we basically, we have sort of almost a semi-local cultural thing that we have to protect in the fairground structures. I mean, you all probably heard the first fairgrounds suggestion for improvement. It was tearing it all down and rebuilding it, and that didn't go over so well with this community, and that's why we pushed to take it over. But we didn't get a whole bunch of money to build things. Anyway, if you look at this, we do the best we could to design the apartments so that they fit with sort of the look of the existing old buildings, but they would also just inherently have an overhang that would come into the midway a little bit, so that you'd have a little bit of covered space when you are sitting there. I mean, it does rain during the fair every now and then, right? So I've been talking about the fair a lot, but also rebuilding those concessions facilities would allow us to put on a whole lot more events in there, different times of year than we're doing now. Okay, so why am I here telling you about it? Well, for one thing, we're neighbors, right? We share a boundary line. For another thing, I'm looking for partners. I went directly to the city of Langley first and said, look, our zoning doesn't necessarily allow us to be building multifamily on the end. And we got a promise from the mayor and the planning director that they're going to help us figure out how to solve that problem. I should have a letter to that effect pretty soon. Then we went to the Island County Commissioners, who have put away or set aside, I'm going to get this wrong, I know I am. Anybody else knows, please correct me, but around $9 million of their CARES Act money, I don't think it's the new Rescue Act money, for affordable housing. And we have at least had verbal commitments from all three commissioners that they will give us a startup. $500,000 is what we're asking them for preliminary design and engineering to make sure we can do it and how many we can do. All right. And I'm here back to that first picture, Joe. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. There. So I'm lost though. Where are we? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's the alleyway going in there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Very good. Yep. So let's go back to picture number either 1 or 2. They were both depicted. So what I need is we want to create, that's a great one. That's looking down Dalton, looking to the west, standing on, what is it, Anthony's going into town? What? Well, Langley Road. Okay, looking down Dalton. Anyway, I thought it was Anthony's, or a different name. Camino. We're standing on Camino looking down. Anyway, so you can see where those cars are parked to the right. The design would be for these 15 to 20 families, couples, whoever they turn out to be able to access in and out of these apartments without ever entering inside of the fairgrounds, depending on what event's going on. Obviously they can if they want, but and in order to do that, we would really like to ask you if we could figure out a way to park 1 car per unit across from these structures, which I have a little history in the parking lot business, and an average stall is about 20 feet deep. And so I'm trying to be realistic and say, we could use 30 feet, partially because there'll probably be landscaping and curbs and other things. But if we could have 30 feet in some form of lease, easement, whatever it is, 30 feet times 10 feet. So basically, 20 stalls are 10 feet wide. So we need 200 feet of these max by 30 feet deep along that. And I know you're busy in the summer parking cars in there. I don't know what else is going on. But anyway, it's something I'd like you to consider. We've got the city of Langley signing on as a partner. We've got the county commissioners signing on as a partner. The housing authority supports this, and I'm going to figure out a way they can help us. And so that is a request. Obviously I'm not expecting any answer now. I need you to be on your radar, and I'd like to continue a conversation about this and see if there's a way to have you help us make this happen.
So first of all, thank you for bringing this to us. These connections between various community groups are really important for the South End, as you well know. I mean, you've been here longer than I have, and I've been here my whole life.
Yeah, well, I was 2 when I wasn't born here.
Yeah.
Like you.
Yeah. Just looking at logistically, to have a discussion about this, we would have a workshop, and it wouldn't be the next one because we really want to focus that on our student voice and student board reps. So the process would be, we'd have a workshop where we can discuss it amongst ourselves and with the community.
Great.
And if we choose to do that, choose to go forward with that, we would love to have you or someone else there to answer questions and discuss things there.
Great. I might not be the smoothest, but I would be happy to come back anytime and discuss the project. I mean, like I say, there's all of these things, and you all know this because you got yourself into these political positions. Everything takes forever to get going, and if none of us have a little bit of a dream and a little bit of future thought, nothing will ever happen. And there's an awful lot of discussion about affordable housing, and really nobody's doing anything about it. I mean, there's $9 million at Island County and nobody has asked for any of it. I mean, there was one other project other than ours in consideration, and it was a small portion of that money. Part of the problem is everybody wants to talk about it. This is a way we can keep our numbers up in our school district, is to make sure that we retain families and working class folks. And we all have an opportunity to help, but we got to sit down and figure out how to start. We want to start. And I will tell you one other thing. I'm sorry, Brooke, to rattle on here, but this is also a reach for the Port of South Whidbey. It'll be a reach for port districts in the state. Port districts have provided affordable housing, but they almost always lease the property out. They don't keep it. I don't want to lease this property out because it belongs to the public through the port district, and future port commissioners deserve to have control of that. So we've gotten a legal opinion. We spent money on a port related attorney, got a legal opinion that this will work, but it's never really been tried where there's actual ownership and management. So, but we're willing to take that chance because I believe, and Jack and Ed both believe, that this is absolutely critically important. I mean, Jack runs restaurants. I mean, he knows how critical this is, and I have these rentals and people are clamoring to get into them and they can't pay $2,000 a month. So anyway, I'd be happy to come back to whatever you guys could put on. And we're just happy that you're open to the idea. It's going to take teamwork to get this done.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have a couple of quick questions, but I want to open it up to any of the other board members who had anything off the top of their heads that they wanted to weigh in with. Joe?
Yeah, well, Mr. Gordon, thank you for coming and presenting to us. I consider myself a proponent of increasing the housing supply in our communities, as long as we do it carefully and in accordance with environmental and other regulations. It seems like we could have more district employees afford to live in the community where they work and have more money in their pockets at the end of the month after they pay for housing. I'm curious what happens to this project if this easement isn't granted.
I'm going to go on Mike there. The question was, what happens to the project if the district does not decide to grant this easement? Do you have an alternative location that's just not as good but feasible?
I haven't really dug deep on where we would park 20 cars. I haven't really figured that out. It's not going to stop the project. I'll do everything I can to keep the project going. This just makes the most sense. It'd be the most appealing. I think if it's a monetary problem, maybe there's some way that through the rents or whatever, we could rent stalls, and make it work out for the school district if there's a loss of revenue. I don't know. But the answer is it doesn't kill the project. I haven't figured out where else on that little piece of property we would park these cars.
Thank you.
That was actually one of the questions that I had as well. So thank you, Joe, for hitting that one. My question was also, one of the other questions was, who is this aimed at? Are you thinking this would be families or single people and couples, or?
They're going to be too small for large families, and it's not going to be practical. And if you're thinking, if we're thinking between 500 and 1,000 square feet, depending on the unit, I mean, you can think practically, Brooke. I mean, you can barely get a 2-bedroom in a 1,000 square feet. You can, and we may, and we haven't really started the design process because it takes money. And I mean, there's private industry that builds, and that's getting expensive. And then there's any municipality. I mean, you know what that means. So I'm trying to get going with the design funding. Personally, my target, and I know Jack Eng supports this and Ed supports this, is just want to be able to keep service workers and working class here on the island. They're going to have to commute here. They already are commuting here. And so that's going to cause just another congestion and another problem over time. We're working on passenger only ferries. We're working on parking in Makatea. So we're working on all of that. But this is a start. I would just like to show the community that this can be done, that you don't have to, everywhere we go, there's always been too many obstacles for somebody to set this up. So the target is working class. The target are the examples I was telling you. It's just folks that are, I mean, if a couple is living there, they're going to be able to afford it, but it's going to have to be managed very specifically like any of these housing units are.
Okay, thank you. I was mostly asking just to see what direct impact on the school district it would have. It certainly has a wider ranging impact. For instance, many of our teachers are single or couples who might be looking for housing. I know that housing has been an issue for our teachers in the past, so there would certainly still be that impact.
There are emergency workers that sometimes they're here for a year. And then, I don't know, your study might be able to tell us, but I would think too, that if we can keep people right after the graduation age or bring them back right during the college or whatever, then even though they don't have a family today, they got back into the South Whidbey environment and then we're able to move up and move on, as opposed to just there's nowhere to stay. People say, I heard today in a council of governments meeting from the mayor of Coupeville that she really didn't think the issue was any different here than anywhere else in terms of the cost of housing. And I think she's right about that. I think people forget that it's not just the cost, it's the availability, period. There's nothing there.
Can I just ask a question? Why not park on the fairgrounds? Why do you need space from the district? Because the merits of the project aren't really the board's kind of purview. It's
right.
Why would you want to park on district land? Why not on the fairgrounds land? That to me is the obvious question.
I'd really rather park on the fairgrounds land because then I wouldn't be standing here. However, I do want another partner. So I'm glad.
But there's more to it than that, right?
Yeah. I think probably right now, the biggest thing is that when the Port of South Whidbey took over the fairgrounds, part of the contract with Island County was that we would provide for the nonprofit that is the Fair Association to put their fair on once a year. And when they do that, they take up every last bit of that space that's there,
including all of the school district space.
Yeah, there you go. And
that's a profit for our students,
right?
Which, again, I'm just going to cut to the chase because I know that's what we're used to.
Yeah.
And for me, why wouldn't you just ask the school district to allow the parking during the fair when people couldn't park on the fairgrounds property rather than want that parking year round?
And maybe that would be a fallback option. I think the other thing that I was going to say, other than the fact that everything within the fairgrounds is used anytime there's events, is that the idea of being able to be accessible sort of outside of the internal part of the fair was part of what drove this. In other words, you got these people moving into these apartments and they really don't have to go inside the fairgrounds. We're able to use fairgrounds property. We're able to rebuild our concessions facility and provide housing. and they'll be able to walk out and get their car and leave without ever getting inside the facility if we have some other kind of event going on. So it fits our needs better than if we were parking inside. So I'm here to ask you if that would even be considerable. And as I said before too, I kind of brought up, Joe, if there's a loss of revenue by some part of the, whether it's sports boosters or who it is, and you could figure out what that is, if that was what this came down to, let's have that conversation. Because like I say, this could work for everybody, but we have to be willing partners. Okay, I will.
Yeah, so thank you. That was the questions that I had. Now, I certainly think that I hope I can speak for the entire board here when I'm saying that we love hearing presentations where we can partner with other groups in the community. We'll listen to anything. Whether or not we can come to an agreement, I think that we can work that through, but we'll absolutely listen to everything, and we appreciate the time and effort that it's taken to come up here and present and put it together and all that.
Not a problem. I'm getting paid about like you are for this, right? But I want to thank you for the consideration and any future consideration, because I know it's just one more thing on your plate and you didn't need it, but it's for the benefit of the community. Thanks a lot for listening to me. All right, I'll sit and I'm excited to see what you got here.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moshe for a proposal for renaming this room.
Take the opportunity to share the district and the board's condolences with Marley, who's here in the audience. She was Julie Haddon's life partner. And we are here tonight to present to the board a proposal. Dr. Haddon was a member of this school board for quite some time, but beyond that, she really had a lifelong history as a dedicated educator. And this information is up on our website under the board's presentation, but she spent her entire life as an educator and meant a great deal to many people, including many people who served on this school board with her. Unfortunately, at the age of 70, she was taken way too soon after a 7-month struggle with bile duct cancer just this past February. So a group of folks contacted me to actually talk about renaming the room that we are in right now after Dr. Haddon. And several of those people came together, including Charlie Courier, John Patton, Val Brown, Andrea Downs, and myself. And we talked about the board's policy on renaming of facilities, the value to the community that Dr. Haddon showed, and have made this recommendation for the board to discuss renaming this particular room and placing this picture and a plaque in this room, dedicating it to the memory of Dr. Julie Haddon. So that's where we are. It's up for the board's discussion and later on in the agenda if the board chooses to take action.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who put this together. And thank you for joining us for this. I think we can get into discussion now and then decide whether we want to vote on it, vote for it later on. So I'll open up the door to anyone who wants to comment first.
This is Marnie. I have a question. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can hear you, Marnie.
Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah, thank you for this presentation and for the beautiful tribute. I am just curious around the terminology. Would the room be referred to as the Haddon Boardroom or as the Haddon Community Room? I know that it's currently referred to as a community room. Would it have a formal title?
I think that's up to the board. It's recommending that the South Whidbey boardroom dedicated to the memory of Julia Haddon, with the assumption that should the boardroom move, the name would move with it. Because sometimes this, in the past, this has not been the boardroom.
Indeed. Okay, that's helpful clarification. Thank you.
That's a really interesting idea, that the boardroom, wherever it is, whatever physical location it occupies.
Well, it
Yeah.
would be, yes, in commemoration of of the board's work, right? So it just seemed to make sense to do it that way. Again, these are board decisions. It's typically the renaming of a facility. And at this point, this is the facility.
So as somebody who was on the committee with this, I think some points of rationale of why we wanted to make this recommendation is that Dr. Haddon really mentored not only board members, but also many of our administrators in this room. She had a beautiful way of just speaking to you and to just knowing what you needed to hear and how to help grow you. And I think that that is why we wanted to center on the boardroom, because the impact of her mentorship really does continue to impact our students on a daily basis. And I have heard that that is what she did her entire career. And that is the legacy that she left for all of us.
Dr. Haddon's wise words at the start of the pandemic will always stick with me, is if we do this right, it will look like we overreacted. And that helped me get through this the last 2 years and center myself on making sure that we were looking out for the students and the staff as our primary concern, and then worrying about optics afterwards. Like, deal with the people that you are there to serve first. And then just keep your attention there. So that is something that really hit me at the time and has stuck with me since. I only knew Dr. Haddon for a short while, but she's had an immense impact on me as a board member and as a leader and as a person.
I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Dr. Haddon personally, but I watched her work as a board member when my kids were young and small. When my kids were small, and you know, her work and her words were often impactful in a meeting and very valuable. And you know, I take, you know, your words really seriously when you talk about how important she is to the growth of our district moving forward. So I absolutely think it's really powerful to offer her memory in this way.
First off, my heart goes out to Marley for her loss, and for Director Downs, who obviously was very impacted by Dr. Haddon and her legacy. And based on the naming policy, the person must be significant to the people of the district. And it sounds like Dr. Haddon really checks the box for our naming policy. I have a procedural question to ask, and I do not in any way want to diminish Dr. Haddon's work or her legacy in asking this. The policy states that the naming committee can bring multiple names up for consideration. And I just wanted to ask if there are any other alternative naming proposals.
We did not discuss any other names at this time.
Thank you.
I first would like to share my condolences. I was unfortunate not to know her personally, but just hearing what other board members have stated about her and her legacy, I absolutely recommend this room be named after her. Thank you.
I really can't speak on to, I don't think I have anything to contribute because I didn't know her. So I will not participate in the conversation.
Is there any other discussion that needs to be had? I don't
I'll
believe so,
just-
but I'm just checking in.
I'll just add, I didn't personally have an opportunity to get to know Dr. Haddon either, but I want to add my voice to the room in terms of acknowledging her significance as a mentor and leader in our community, and that her legacy as a school board member and as a neighbor and friend clearly impacted many of the people who are currently leading and learning in this district. So I agree that she certainly checks that box for community significance. And again, I want to restate the condolences to Marley and her loved ones.
Thank you, Marnie, and sorry about skipping there. It's hard to check on here as well as side to side, but thank you for speaking up on that. Okay, I think we're set on that, and we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. We'll get a vote on this later in the meeting under new business. Based on the comments, I have little doubt which way that vote will go. So we'll next move on to the consent agenda, which usually comes second, but we pushed it after presentation since we had students here. So are there any objections to approving the consent agenda as provided? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved as provided. We'll now move on to unfinished business, which brings back memorandum 2122- sorry, you're right. Yes. Now we move on to public comment. Thank you. Yes. That always comes before our business so that we can get the community's comments on things before we vote. So who's first on our list?
Darlene Davenport.
Please make sure to check that the mic is on. I think it still is, but I'm not sure.
Okay, can you hear me through this, man? Right about there? Okay. Okay. Last week, a fellow state senator alleged Michigan State Senator Mallory McMorrow of grooming and sexualizing kindergartners as well as promoting race-based education. Her response was, quote, "So who am I? I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom who knows that the very notion that learning about slavery or redlining or systemic racism somehow means that children are being taught to feel bad or hate themselves because they are white is absolute nonsense. I want every child in this state to feel seen, heard, and supported, not marginalized and targeted because they are not straight, white, and Christian. And if more people like me, who are not in a minority group, who are not under attack, stand up and call it out as hateful, hollow nonsense, then we take away its power. And that description is me, adding on grandma and great-grandma to my identity and having dear LGBTQ friends. I represent the many parents who want to thank you, Dr. Moshe, the board of directors, administrators, teachers, and all school support staff for your leadership, vision, support, incredible commitment, and encouragement you have all provided to our students. We are indebted to you for giving our students an environment that is safe, challenging, and tailored to their individual abilities and needs as they pursue their endeavors of becoming lifelong learners. Your goals of ensuring cultural understanding and awareness, diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of our educational system is already bearing fruit as I watch and listen to the student members of this board. In 2017, I became concerned about what kind of a world my grandchildren, and especially my great-grandchildren, would inherit from us. However, communicating with a few South Whidbey school students, I am completely reassured that these mature, thoughtful, and inspiring students will become the future leaders of our world, nation, state, and communities. I wrote a free-form poem in 2020 outlining historical events of US history, half of which I was never taught. The events are tragedies of our history, but the poem ends with hope. These students, including USL, are fulfilling that hope each day, and it is because of all of you listening to and embracing changes that the students themselves have advocated for. These young people are doing great things right now, and I have no doubt they will continue doing great things in the future. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I need to mention I have one grandchild and a great-grandchild in the South Whidbey School District, 2 more great-grandchildren in the Oak Harbor School District. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your comment.
Thank you and good evening. I was going to do this from home, and then Dr. Moke reminded or told me that I had to come here, so I rushed over, which is fine. I'm just a little shy about speaking in public, and I'm a little disheveled, but here goes. I want to speak tonight and hopefully make it within 5 minutes about the letter that was read to you on March 23rd by Margaret King and Maureen Green, which was accompanied by 2 public disclosure requests, which you probably are aware of. What some people may not know is that the district actually got 20 public disclosure requests because 10 people decided to double up on these 2 requests. So a reminder, back in November of last year, 2/3 of us, large majority of the voters, which includes parents, taxpayers, obviously residents, voted for the 3 incumbents and Andrea and Marnie. Earlier this year, the same large majority again voted for a tax levy, meaning really that we trust you, we agree with your decisions, or we trust the direction you are sending us in, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is, which is basically we're going to tax ourselves, which is the same thing I've done all of my adult life, supporting school districts, park and rec districts, port districts. This is what I think I do as an American. I want to change course here a little bit, and I apologize that some of these things I'm going to say are kind of gross, but they need to be said. These are quotes. 1, this is the worst one. Can you effing believe it? Parents in Washington State are so effing stupid, they believe ... The second one, all caps. Real patriots don't register to vote, don't pay federal income taxes, don't pay Social Security taxes, and drive without driver's licenses while smoking pot. And I hope there's some parents here, pay attention to that. Real patrons drive without driver's license, without smoking pot. And finally, this one hits home for me. The main head chief boss, Antichrist Bill Gates and his father are the same ilk of Zionist Jews who were the true perpetrators of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany And now these same Zionist Jews are attempting to commit mass genocide all over the world and the United States using the coronavirus as a cover-up for their pre-planned genocide of all the Goyim, Christians, and all other non-Jews. And for any of you not up on your Yiddish, Goyim means non-Jews. So who said this? These are words written by a man named Louis Ewing, L-U-I-S-E-W-I-N-G, from Moclips, Washington, hundreds of miles from our district. And he is the same man who wrote the 2 public disclosure requests that were read to you in March. Just let that sink in here. What is this man saying on his Facebook page? And what is he saying, delivering, having other people deliver to this school board, Oak Harbor School Board, and school boards all over our state? I want to read from this letter, just one part of it. They said, Representative Joel McIntyre attempted to introduce a bill in the current legislative session. Joel McIntyre is a Republican state representative from Grays Harbor County. It's about the school board membership for the Washington State School Directors Association. And it ends, this paragraph ends as, unfortunately, Joe McIntyre was just recently strong-armed into dropping this bill under pressure from the Washington State School Directors Association. What is really important to understand here is that this is a total absolute lie. No question. And the reason I know this is that I contacted Representative Joel McIntyre, Republican state representative, and this is what he, just about a half hour, emailed back to me. And I'm not going to read it in its entirety, but he says, I was not strong-armed. Nobody spoke to me, and I was not threatened in any regards. I simply spoke with my local school district and asked them what they thought about such bill, and I was informed that this bill would not assist them in any way, and that in my mind was made up.
That's all the time we have now.
Okay. Anyways, I hope you understand the message I'm getting across here. Again, I want to say thank you to the school board, and I will have to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that comment. Do we have anyone else signed up to speak? And there is no one else online. Thank you both for making those comments, for sharing your comments. That is a valuable part of our community comment, public comment, sorry, is a valuable part of our deliberations for getting the opinions and feelings of the community. Now we will move on, after I jumped ahead a little overexcitedly, to unfinished business. Memorandum 2122-39, approval of new policy 5004 infection control program. This is, we discussed at, I'm going to turn it over to you. You know what you're doing.
Yep.
Here.
So this was the policy that we brought up at the previous board workshop, and Director Greenherron had some questions about some additional language around inoculation to chickenpox, and also whether or not to add in the COVID-19 vaccination. We made the determination to seek legal counsel on their advice on whether or not to do that. Legal counsel came back at before the last workshop and said they would recommend that we accept the policy as we had previously presented it. And so that is what we have brought back. So this is the policy without those additions to the language. And so it is as it stands at the previous board meeting for us to consider.
Do we have any discussion on this policy? We've talked about it a lot. I'm just checking once to make sure. Okay, all those in favor of approving memorandum 2122-39, approval of the new policy 5004 infection control program, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. I apologize. to our student board members. I talked to you about doing advisory votes, and in my haste to move through this one, forgot it. We'll do it for the next, the new business items. You have each commented on this one, so we've gotten your input at a previous date, but I should still follow through with what we discussed. So we will now move on to new business. Memorandum 2122-43, approval of amendment to new policy 3411, accommodating students with seizure disorders or epilepsy.
There was minimal additional changes to this that we've already discussed at the workshop, and no changes beyond that.
Any comments or discussion on this? Do I have advisory votes from our two student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
In regards to Memorandum 2122-43, approval of amendment to new policy 3411, accommodating students with seizure disorders or epilepsy, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2122-43 has been approved. Memorandum 2122-44, approval of update to South Whidbey School District Policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business, and quorum. This one is just,
There was the addition of the land acknowledgement into the policy. No other additional changes that other than what we discussed at the workshop.
any board member comments, questions, discussion on this?
Yeah, I have a comment. I'm glad that we are deliberating on whether to add this passage to the policy and thereby enshrine the land acknowledgement as a true part of every meeting. And I hope that we can take that as the first of many steps towards inclusion and recognition and involvement of the indigenous nations who occupied and still do occupy this land that we're on.
Thank you, Joe.
Do I have advisory votes from our two student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those in favor of Memorandum 2122-44, approval of update to South Whidbey School District Policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business, and quorum, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2122-44 has been approved. Memorandum 2122-45, approval of update to South Whidbey School District Policy 4200, safe and orderly learning environment.
Minimal additions here, nothing beyond what we discussed in the workshop.
Any comments, questions, discussion? Student board members, advisory vote.
Aye.
Aye.
All those in favor of approving Memorandum 2122-45, approval of update to South Whidbey School District Policy 4200, safe and orderly learning environment, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2122-45 has been approved. Memorandum 2122-46, approval of update to South Whidbey School District Policy 2021, request for reconsideration of printed materials.
Nothing but the line of additional language.
Any comments, discussion? Student board members, advisory vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry.
Memorandum 2122- all those in favor of approving Memorandum 2122-46, approval of update to South Whidbey School District Policy 2021, request for reconsideration of printed materials, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2122-46 has been approved. Memorandum 2122-47, approval of Haddon renaming proposal. Any comments, discussion?
I think I'll abstain from this one.
I would just like to ask for that a clearer proposal indicating, is it simply a proposal to mount a plaque in the room to this effect? Or is it also a proposal to call the room by a new name, such as the Haddon Boardroom or the Haddon Community Room?
Let's take a look at the wording of the proposal as it stands, just to make sure. Thank you for getting that clarification in there. Let's.
It
take a-
actually says that the South Whidbey Boardroom is dedicated in the memory of Dr. Julie Haddon, and there'd be a plaque and a picture. I don't know that we have to call it other than the boardroom.
Okay.
So it appears to be a dedication rather than an actual renaming, as currently written. And so then the question is that what the board wants?
I think it would be the same that we did for the outdoor classroom where we dedicated it to them. And that would be in alignment with what we have previously done as a board and similar language to what we have previously done as a board.
I agree that we want to keep the same. I'm just making sure that we're all on the same, as Marnie was bringing up, that we're all on the same page before we take any vote.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's a proposal for the dedication of the boardroom as opposed to a proposal for the renaming of the boardroom.
It's actually under the renaming policy,
Yeah.
so it would be renaming of the boardroom. I mean, it is that policy that we're referring to.
So the last paragraph of the recommendation says the renaming committee appointed by the superintendent met and recommends that the board consider renaming the board meeting room after Dr. Julie Haddon.
So to that effect, perhaps a clearer proposal would be to say that we propose the renaming of the South Whidbey Boardroom to call it the South Whidbey Haddon Boardroom, for instance. I don't want to get us stuck on a fine point of language here, but I do think if we're saying we're renaming the room, I'd like to know what the name of the room is under this proposal.
Let me just take a look here and see.
Right, let's speak up. I think the room is currently called the community room, called the boardroom currently.
Right, this would be actually renaming the theoretical room wherever we are meeting as the board. But it's a good point. We should have the exact title. I would suggest the Dr.
I
Julie
followed
Haddon.
the actual, what we did for the outdoor classroom.
Okay.
We did the same process. We came up with the same language. If you look at the Rini Neff dedication plaque, it says the Rini Neff outdoor classroom. So this would be the Julie Haddon boardroom.
Sure. So perhaps to put a clearer proposal forward, it could be we propose to rename the boardroom the Julie Haddon Boardroom and mount said plaque.
That sounds agreeable to me.
That is what I understood that we were proposing. So I'm fine with that because it's what I thought we were doing.
Okay. Can I just ask, does Dr. Haddon's partner feel that the Julie Haddon Boardroom is the appropriate name, or that the Dr. Julie Haddon Boardroom esteems her better?
She has ducked out.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
It's proposed as the Dr. Julie Haddon boardroom.
Okay, the Dr. Julie Haddon Boardroom. Thank you. I do appreciate the language clarity, just to be sure we all know what we're voting on.
Okay, so everyone feels comfortable with the proposal with that clarification that has been made verbally? Do we need an amendment?
Can I propose one change, perhaps an amendment, to retain the word community, because this proposal actually also changes the community room to the boardroom in addition to dedicating it to the memory of Dr. Haddon.
So the rationale for leaving it as the boardroom was that the boardroom can move. So we have not always been in a community room. This is just the place where the board is meeting. There have been times where we've met in the gym. There's been times where we've met in the high school. So the intention is that this would follow wherever the board is, regardless of the physical space that they are occupying.
Oh, okay. In that case, I withdraw my amendment.
Yeah, so it would be whenever we're not meeting in here, this is still the community room. Okay, I believe that's all the discussion. So We've got one student board member abstaining. So do we have an advisory vote from you?
Aye.
Okay. All those in favor of approving memorandum 2122-47, the approval of the Haddon renaming proposal, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2122-47 has been approved. Our final item of new business, memorandum 2122-48, approval of the South Whidbey High School tennis court retaining wall. I'm going to turn this one over to Dr. Moshe.
Thank you. As you can see from the picture that's been provided, the tennis courts, they're the two that are sort of off by themselves. They're not blue, they're green still. They are in need of repair, and it's due to the need for this retaining wall because the structure is disintegrating. I don't know, Dan, if there's any more than that, but you can see from JJ's proposal here that it's just under $100,000 for that to be completed. It's structurally necessary. It'll come out of the levy dollars for construction.
So this does not impact staffing levels of any sort since it's coming from a different bucket, just making that clear. And
we can only spend these dollars on improvements and in technology.
I did just have a curiosity, and I don't know if you've had a chance to check whether the tennis courts were built first or the pool that they are sliding into was built first. Just curious where an error, if there was an error, was made.
That's a great question, and it's from back in the 90s, so I don't have an answer. And JJ and Dan and I actually spoke about that, and we don't know whether the chicken or the egg came first.
And it was just a curiosity of mine.
There's nobody to go back to blame, if that's what you're asking.
And I presume that these courts are either actively in use or needed for active use after their repair.
They are actively used. They're just in such a state of disrepair, it's getting unhealthy to use them.
And I can attest to that.
Thank you.
One question I have, oh, sorry, go ahead. One question I have is about how long would this project take?
I don't actually know, Audrey. Do you know, Dan?
No, I don't have an estimate on, I don't know.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from the board?
Are there other similar projects that would not get funded if we fund this instead?
I do not believe there are other projects at this time.
Certainly, it's always a question of priorities, no matter whenever we're spending money anywhere. But yeah, and so as you said, this is starting to get.
I would say it's the time to do it, from my experiences.
Okay, seeing no other comments, questions, or discussion, do I have advisory votes from the two student board members?
Aye.
Okay. All those in favor of approving memorandum 2122-48, approval of the South Whidbey High School tennis court retaining wall, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2122-48 has been approved. That concludes our new business for the meeting. We'll move on to our reports and our financial and enrollment report with Mr. Pullman.
Mike.
Yeah, it has to be real close.
So our financial report as of March 31st, enrollment report as of April 1st. So start with some good news. If we look at the enrollment, you can see that the April enrollment of this year is actually a little bit higher than it was last year at this time. We're still for the year, a little bit behind last year, but it's very close. And so very positive, possibly the first time in 20 years, we may not actually have fewer kids than we did the year before. We're that close. It's like 4 FTE at the time. On the right side is just a breakdown. The blue is our basic education program. You can see on the different months what those are, and the green is the ALE program. On the lower left, the red dotted line is our current year enrollment, which is different than our normal pattern. It's similar to last year, which was a very odd year for us, but it actually went up last month. And then on the lower right is just a breakdown by grade group of how many kids in kindergarten versus what we budgeted and that type of thing. So we are above budget. We had budgeted 1145 and we're about 1162 at the moment. So that's very positive on the enrollment. Next, please.
Dan,
Yes.
while you're on that one, the rise in basic education enrollment and the drop in ALE, is that from students moving from ALE to general education?
That's normally what happens. Yes.
I figured,
Yeah.
just wanted to confirm.
And
Thank you.
Occasionally we get a few that are new, but what we've seen is some movement this year because, as you know, the ALE program is a new program for us and we haven't had before. So we have roughly 72 students in that program, and half of those were in our regular program the prior year, and half were new to the district because of the start of that program. But yes, there is some movement back and forth on a monthly basis.
Thank you.
Next, please. And this is a breakdown. If you look at the ALE on the left, the red is the students that are participating in the South Whidbey School District ALE program, and the blue are through Spokane Virtual Academy. So that's an online program through another school district in the state. And then on the right, it's just the same type of breakdown, but showing by month. And then on the bottom is just a breakdown by building. The blue is the K4, the orange is the 5-6, the gray is the 7-8, the yellow is the 9-12, and the small blue is the SWAP program at the 9-12 location at the high school. So it gives you an idea by month what those look like and where the majority of our students are housed. Next, please. So we are 58.33% of the way through our school year. As a reminder, we start in September and go through August. We're on a fiscal year rather than a calendar year. Our revenue at $11,706,000 is about a little over 54% of our budget, and the expenditures are a little less than 57%. We spent about 12.7 million so far year to date. So you can see that we have spent more than we have received in revenue, but we're still within those margins of percentages that we would normally see. And the lower right is just a historical look at revenue versus expenditures. And you will see that this year our expenditure is larger than our revenue. The yellow line is larger than the blue, but that is expected and it was budgeted that way. We had planned on using fund balance in the current year. Next, please. So a quick look at our revenue in the lower left or the upper left. The first is our local property tax revenue, and you can see that has gone down slightly over the years. And that's because our tax base is not based on a rate per 100,000. It's based on the number of students we have, and we are capped by the state at a certain dollar amount times number of students. Good news also is the local revenue, the second column over, a little larger than last year, not as large as it was a couple of years ago, but most of that is from the community center. So we're starting to see a restoration of our rent coming back in. So that's starting to build again. The big one in the middle is our basic education funding, and that's based exactly on student enrollment, which makes sense that as we have fewer students, we collect less money from the state for that purpose. So it is a number that declines and has been for several years. And then there's state special purpose money. We've talked about that before, but it's money for special education, learning assistance programs, et cetera. You can see that that is a little bit from last year, again, down from 2 years ago. So that's a pattern we see that our revenue is decreasing. And on the right side is federal money, and that's the CARES Act and all the other funds that we are receiving. That's substantially more for this year and next year than we had in the past years, and it will be gone and all spent by next year. On the upper right side is a breakdown of our expenditures by objects or groups, and the three on the left are salaries and benefits. That's 88% of our budget. And you can see, the difference in, how those are going up over time. The second one over is our classified staff. And you see there's a big drop last year as we moved into a virtual environment. We didn't have as many people working on site, so that reduced our costs. But again, it's back up. And then the middle one is benefits, taxes, insurance, and you can see that continues to rise year after year. And the three on the right are supplies, services, and travel. And again, very similar to what we saw prior to closing down and going to a virtual environment. On the lower left is our revenue. The red line, dotted line, is the current year. And you can see that it's really not much different than the prior years. But we move to the right side, and the yellow line of expenditures is the current year expenditures. And you see that it's actually rising. So we've talked about this many times, that because of our enrollment and the regionalization and all the things that affect our funding here, that our revenue is not actually rising where our expenditures continue to. Quickly, if we look at our total expenditures with encumbrances, and that's the costs we know we have, contracts and things that are in place, payroll, et cetera, we're at about 93% of our budget, or about $20.7 million. So we're still fine as far as from a financial standpoint of what our budget looks like. And then the circle on the right is just a breakdown that we kind of saw before of salaries, benefits, and all those different parts. And you can see again, 88% of that is actually in staffing costs. Next, please. Budget status report is just a breakdown of the revenue and expenditures that we had looked at before, the 11.7 million, where that comes from, the 12.7 million expenditures, what type of programs are we spending that in. You can see the big chunks are regular instruction, which are a basic education program, followed by the next two are special education. And then the very bottom is support services, all things across district. Those are the three largest things. Again, 93%, so we're still in good shape. Our fund balance is currently a little $4.2 million. Balance sheet, another way of looking at our accounting. It's basically an asset liability balance type sheet, and it gives you a fund balance for each of those funds, and I'll talk about those little funds in a moment. But it just it's the accounting, the fiscal accounting of how we do things in the state with the school. Next, please. We do have other funds that we don't talk about as much. Capital projects is where the tennis court repair will come from. We currently have about $2.2 million in that account. And again, it's for structural construction of buildings and repairs, and technology cannot be used for anything else. The debt service fund is for repayment of a loan for energy retrofits that we had done in the district. The associate student body has about $64,000 available in there. The transportation vehicle fund used for the purchase of yellow school buses has $462. We get a 1-year depreciation payment, and that comes in August, and that's for the buses that we currently have. As long as we're talking about that, I did watch a webinar today about electric school buses. The $5 billion that's coming out, about 500 million of that is going to be allocated in the coming year, which equates to about 600 electric school buses across the nation. So it's not a huge number of buses, even though it sounds like a lot of money, but the way they're doing it. The good news is that we are a rural, distant community, which means we're a certain number of miles away from a metro area, which qualifies us to apply. And it's a lottery, so I don't want to get your hopes up, but we will apply for it. Should know by October, and then there'll be 5 more chances to the next 5 years, basically. So we'll see how that. And the last one, which I really can't see, is the Private Risk Trust Fund, and that's money donated in behalf of students for scholarships. And it's a continual fund that we only spend the interest and not actually the principal. So it stays there forever. Next, please. So any questions I can answer?
I had 2. The first one was just on the that trust, the balance there. I assume that'll be given out in scholarships at the end of this year.
Yes, there's scholarships, and there's the 2 large scholarships. The Alan G. May, which equates to about $500,000, and there's a Drake scholarship, which we accepted a few years ago. That's about $270,000, and they're both set up where the interest is given out in scholarships to graduating seniors, and there's a criteria that came with each of those when we accepted the money that dictates how that happens.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that my assumption on why there was still money there and why we weren't giving it out was accurate, that we just haven't done it yet.
Well,
this
we
year.
also can't give the.
Right.
all of
I
it.
meant from the revenue side.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, the revenue is what we give
Yes.
away, and we usually, we pay the bills like a year later when the kids go to college and we get it something
Right.
from Western and
Right.
they say you owe, that type of thing.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Excellent. And my other one was, so it was back on page, the difference between the budgeted and year-to-date on the fund balance, there was about a 1 million difference. That's the ESSER2 funds or the ESSER funds and the CARES Act primarily, or is that?
No, it's a difference between budget and actual.
Mhm.
So we create the budget like
Right.
we're doing now
Right.
for next year. And, we don't always know what our ending fund balance is going to be. Sometimes it's different than what we project in May, those type things.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and sometimes, and what it really came down to is the state did a few things and they're thinking about doing something this year, stabilization funds.
Got
Where
it.
all of a sudden at the end of
Yep.
the year, they decide they're going to give us $400,000 for basic education stabilization because we had fewer kids and,
Mhm.
those type of things. So that's really the difference you're going to see in there. And I'm expecting another stabilization fund payment this year that will come probably in May. So, hopefully it comes before I get the budget done, so I know what that looks like.
Thank you. That was the question I was looking for, is what the cause was rather than,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's based on an estimate in the beginning versus actual, but it's those stabilization funds that we were unaware of that we were going to receive at the time.
there we go. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I got the difference between the actual and budget. I was just curious about the cause, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else from other board members?
Just gratitude. Thank you again for the detailed report.
Welcome.
Okay. We'll move on to the student board member report. Just getting it up on screen. Yep.
Right. We have our monthly board report to deliver. So, of course, the COVID situation, I'm sure Dr. Mocha will talk about that a little later, but there's been a pretty serious increase in COVID cases at the 9 through 12 level. It's part of the reason I'm wearing my mask right now. And masking is up among students. I would say just a rough estimate, maybe 60-70% is what I've seen at the 7 through 12 level. And the likely source of the high cases, although we're seeing it reflected geographically, but prom is a possible source for some of these cases. You can kind of see a bump after prom. So that's likely.
Which was right after spring break.
Yes, that's also possible. The fact that you have all these people going on vacation and they all come back at the exact same time, you have an event where you put all these students in a room together, it tends to sometimes have that effect.
Okay, so the South Whidbey High School ASB just had its election for the executive branch today, which is really exciting. I actually ran for vice president. So the following positions, president, VP, secretary, treasurer, and public relations were up, and 6 candidates ran from various grade levels, which is really great to see. And class ASB elections are around the corner, which I'm really excited about, especially to see what freshmen are running and what ASB will look like next year. Okay, do you want to go into that?
You can start with Math Olympiad.
Okay, Math Olympiad did amazing. They attended the Washington State High School math competition and won first and second. So that was just over the top completely amazing. And their team consisted of different grade levels. So it's really great to see the collaboration and just being able to achieve at such a high level. Model UN today was planning a debate for later into kind of closer to the end of the school year. We're discussing zoning laws to First Amendment. So really collecting our ideas together and what we want to see debated.
Yeah, I was very excited about Math Olympiad getting #1 in the state. That's really an achievement for the school and for the district. But if you have any debate ideas for Model UN, that would be great. We're thinking about holding another debate.
Okay, spring sports are underway. Tennis had a match today. And I'm sure they're going to be excited to hear about the new retaining wall as well. Track and field is headed off to Granite tomorrow. So all the sports are kind of like midway through, so kind of tapering off to get ready for conference championships. It's also been really great to see the middle school track and field out as well, and kind of seeing discussions back and forth from the high schoolers and the middle schoolers is really exciting. Soccer had senior night last night against Sultan, and I believe it ended in a tie. And boys and girls golf have been competing at Useless Bay. If anyone's interested in watching that, that's super fun and fascinating. Okay, so middle school 8th graders are planning their 8th grade field trip and dance and kind of collecting ideas. Still some details need to be finalized, but that was exciting to hear about. They also finished the Your Digital Footprint presentations, where they were encouraged to kind of go home and have discussions with their guardians on what online safety looks like and how they can kind of partner with their parents in finding what works for them and their family. They also had the 3rd round of iReady test this week, where they kind of discussed with their teachers where they are and how they can improve their scores, and kind of like creating that relationship to really benchmark where they are and how to improve. And at the beginning of May, middle school will also be having ASB elections. So super excited for that. And I actually was fortunate to sit down with a few 6th graders and the athletic director last week to discuss finding ways to get 6th graders more involved in sports, because with differences in schedules, it's really hard for them to attend middle school practices with 7th and 8th because they come in past warmups. So finding ways that they're able to have after school sports and competitions, and just really benefit their health and well-being, especially coming out of a pandemic. Okay, I'll take this slide as well. So I was just absolutely blown away by the 4th graders presentation tonight with Art from Your Heart. That was so cool, and hearing how it connects back into the community. And there's also a student marimba performance coming up at the end of the year with student performers. So that's exciting.
All right, now I get to talk. So I have a very short amount of time left on this board, unfortunately. And so one of my focuses is figuring out how our work as student board members can be continued by the next student board member. We have a system where there are 2-year terms and they overlap. So every year there's a new student board member election. That's the system we currently have in place. That'll be reviewed at the next workshop, and sort of the position in general will be reviewed. But one of the most important pieces of our role as a member of this board is sort of how we get here and the election process. So that'll be an important focus of the next workshop. I really want to make sure that we bring in as many interested students as possible, and we expand the opportunity to as many students as possible. So I'm trying to collect information on what student goals are from the position and what they want to see from their student board member, so that next year we have a student board member who has the support of the entire student body, who is known by the entire student body, and who can really get some good work done for the district. So that's kind of been my focus. I'm also graduating, so I haven't been able to focus on my position as much as I wish I could have in the last month.
And something I brought back from the National School Board Conference that I hope to include in the next election is making sure that the candidates prior to being elected are visiting different campuses and kind of checking in with the needs of elementary school students and middle school students. Because that's a part I didn't do before I was elected, and I think it would have been really crucial. And it's seeing how people interact outside of like the high school environment is a crucial part of this role, especially as we're representatives of every single South Liberty School District student. So that's something I'm hoping to see.
Yeah. Some of our colleagues across the country are elected by students 6 through 12. If we can have that happen, that is my dream for every single student who really any student who wants to participate in the process and who has something to add to have that opportunity, because students are they're 100% of the consequences of the board, but they're also sort of 0% of the decision making, and that's changing, but it's still something that we have to work towards.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the broad range of topics as always, and bringing in some of the key points that you see as you do every single time. I'm really excited for the next board workshop, but I can get to that during board comments. We'll move over to superintendent report. Dr. Moshe.
Thank you. So I wanted to, knowing that Kurt was going to be presenting tonight, I wanted to actually piggyback on that and talk with the board about some upcoming dates, number one, but really what real estate do you have and what does enrollment look like in terms of building use and planning forward, and how would you like to engage your community? So first and foremost, you heard about the next workshop. Wanted to bring the board's attention to the meetings that are coming up and the topics. Saul's very excited about May 25th. He gets to actually chair the meeting. Also on that meeting is currently the superintendent evaluation discussion. Then we have a board workshop with the results of CEE, and then the superintendent and board goals, and so on, until we get to August, where it's future planning conversations. And that's what I'd like to go into. But before I do that, I want to make sure that the board is good with the dates the way they're set. And I think we do need to talk about when to meet in August.
Yeah, there is one other point on here, which is the retreat that is currently scheduled for August. But last year we shifted it to June, and it was very helpful, I thought, for working on goals both for Dr. Moshe and for the board. So I wanted to see if the board was interested in shifting it to June as well, either putting it before one of those two. I mean, theoretically, it would be before the June one, but then we don't have the CEE review
You can
done
do
yet.
it June 22nd,
Yeah.
before the business meeting.
Right, but then we've had the workshop about setting the goals.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so there's some timing issues there.
Would it make sense to have the retreat between the June workshop and June meeting, where at the workshop we would get public comment on goals, and then we can take that plus anything we've discussed amongst ourselves and have a deeper dive on it at the retreat, and then at the meeting is when we deliberate.
We could certainly use that. That's a
You could still do it early on the 22nd and achieve the same thing. So you're
Yeah.
not out more than 2 nights in a month.
Yeah.
That's up to the board.
that is a good point, that we can use that. The benefit of doing it before the 22nd would be that we could have the actual goals on the agenda for folks to look at ahead of time. But as opposed to if we were working on them immediately before the business meeting. But they would still have the opportunity to see them there at the business meeting to make public comment. So that's something to consider. I do like the idea of to alleviate some of this schedule crunch to get that retreat either between the two or before the business meeting.
So as a working member of the board who works outside the home, the week in between would be multiple graduations. And so I would not be available. The 22nd would work for me, or the 8th would work for me for an all-day retreat, pending childcare.
One thing, we usually get the CEE data before we have the review, correct?
It'll probably come in early that week. You could certainly have it before the evening meeting to look through. But I can't say how much before that.
Right. My thinking was that if we had the retreat before the June 8th, we would have the data at least, even if we didn't have the review
From CEE.
from the CE experts.
That's true.
Just again, looking at schedules, like that 8th all day would work for me. After the 10th, after school gets out, my duties at work change significantly, and I'll be needed during those daytime hours. So I will be less able to join an all-day meeting after the 10th.
And would the 8th work for you? And the two folks here, virtual and our student reps, although Saul, you'll have finished up by then.
He'll be done. He told us he's not coming
Yeah.
back.
I think the May 25th will be my last meeting.
Yeah. So we will actually theoretically have a new student board member at that point.
In that case, I will show up. I will want to see that.
So Audrey, would that,
I think that date works. Yeah.
and Joe and Marnie?
Yeah, it might be hard for me to get there before 4 p.m. depending on work commitments, but I could certainly give it a try.
That date works for me.
Okay, so are folks comfortable with setting our retreat for June 8th before the board workshop? Okay, let's do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Is that the only thing? Can I move through?
Yeah, that was the only scheduling thing, I believe.
Okay, so now that we have scheduling taken care of, what I really want to talk about during the superintendent's update is where we are so that we can know where we're headed. And I shared a little bit earlier when we were talking with Kurt about the Fairgrounds proposal, but I really wanted to take a deeper look at what the 2020 census is telling us. It's really no surprise. We know that we live in a place where our population is aging, me included, all of us included really, but what's startling is the number of people that are under the age of 5 has dropped by percentage. And it's significant, even more significant than just the drop is the number of people on the island actually has increased a little bit since 2010. So that percentage dropping is really kind of surprising. The school-age population is also down. It's 10.5% down from what it was, which was 13.3. So what we're seeing is no surprise for all of us who continue to look at this graph and have seen this graph time and time again about where our enrollment was and where it continues to go. So this is not a crisis. This is simply a discussion point of, okay, we know this to be true. So what does that mean for the school district? And what does it look like in our buildings? And this is where it starts to get a little bit more real. Many of our staff know that it's real because we kept many staff this year because of COVID to help mitigate the impact of COVID. And we're moving into next year knowing that those staff will not be with us. So if you look at our school building, this is a draft, for example, of our elementary school building, the building we are currently in. In September, there will be 4 classrooms that are vacant. Again, I'm not going to draw conclusions. I'm just going to present you with the facts because I think we need to engage with our community to start making some plans about what does that mean. Same thing at the South Campus. If you look at this campus where you see 5, 6, we'll have 6 sections of grades 5 and 6. That means 6 teachers. There are currently 8. There'll be a vacant room. This is like anyone's house. If you have the space, you move into the space. Do you really need the space? So the space used in this building, one could question whether or not it's all necessary to be used. Not in this coming September, but where will we be a year from now? Same vision for the high school. Each of these rooms has a purpose on both floors. We look at the art room, we have one art teacher. Again, she uses all 3 spaces. Does she need all 3 art rooms? Maybe she does. But it's just a point of interest as we start to look toward next year. I want the board to be aware of its real estate and its resources. High school 2nd floor, you can see that the entire top line up here, this is the current 7th and 8th grade. So again, we have the data. It's a matter of what we use it for. The other thing I wanted to share with the board is its real estate. I think it's really important, especially given our earlier conversation, to remember all of the board's real estate. So there's this 40-acre parcel of undeveloped land, 7-acre parcel of undeveloped land. Here's the North Campus that we're in right now, the South Campus, district office, and then the high school plot. This is the South Whidbey Community Center site. I had highlighted over here, this is where Kurt was discussing the parking and using some of that land right there. Outdoor classroom, it's very restricted use, but it is owned by the school district. And then there's the old Bayview School, which is another parcel of land that the board owns. So I point all of that out because I think that as a community, we need to come together and start engaging about what does the future hold? How are we as a community going to engage with the larger community to talk about the glaring fact of housing? And I was challenged by Mr. Rufus Rose to do something when I talked about housing challenges, because we talk about it, we admire the problem, but what are we going to do about it? So I would suggest to the board, one of the things that I have been doing is engaging with other agencies about what are we doing, and let's at least have a seat at the table so that we can have conversation about it. And I look to the board because a couple things came to my attention. One is that we're a district of under 2,000 students. I am not in any way, shape, or form suggesting we do this, but it's a point of interest to me to have found out that as a school district of under 2,000 students, a board could engage its community in creating teacher housing through a bond. I didn't know that. I found that out in doing some research around this. Doesn't mean that you would want to, but what if there were some discussion around district land and potential housing? Anyway, my recommendation is that we start this August in opening those community conversations again and talking about what we're going to do over the next 1 to 3 years. And the reason I say 1 to 3 years is because it would take at least that long to change the direction around enrollment. Just again, if we look back at what we have in terms of space in our district, if every student available to us came to us out of the population of students of school age, we would still have more space in our buildings than we would need. We have a head count of 1,318 students. By my calculation of the total population, there are about 1,700 students who would be age appropriate for our schools. And we have 1,300 of them. So another couple of hundred students, we could still house them. So without housing that is affordable by young families, and we've done a lot of data diving, way too early to share all of the data in my head, but there are a lot of houses on Whidbey that are not occupied, but they are Airbnbs. So we know that, right? We know our own houses that we own have gone up in value quite a bit. It's become difficult for young families or people of income that South Whidbey is kind of unaffordable for some folks. So do we sit at the table and work with our community? That's my question for the board. How do you want to move forward? So what I'm proposing is that we just start to engage in the conversation around what does it look like? What does it look like for us as a district, and where do we fit within the community?
Thank you, Dr. Moshe. And I would be interested in engaging in that conversation. The other piece that I do want to bring up is if you can go back to your graph, there are two distinct pieces that come out to me in that population graph. Keep going, this one. The decrease in the birth to 5, along with the decrease in families who you would expect to have birth to 5 age children. I know personally that there is only one daycare on South Whidbey that meets working parents' hours in a reasonable way. It has a 2-year wait list. That means, and they don't even take children below 12 months of age. So that means that if I want care for my 1-year-old, I have to be on that list before I even get pregnant. And that means that if my child happens to come off that list, I'm paying for a slot that I can't use. The closest infant care for our families in South Whidbey is EB's Academy up in Coopville. That has a year-long wait list. When I got pregnant with my son, my husband and I put him on every single childcare option on the entire island. I still did not have care until 3 months after my maternity leave ended. I went with a private nanny, not because it was what we could afford, but because I didn't have another option. And when she left, because of the housing being unaffordable and living here being unaffordable, I was scrambling. The closest care I could find was at Deception Pass. I live on South Whidbey. So yes, I want to engage in a conversation about housing, but if families cannot find childcare for their children, they will not stay. And if my husband was not deployed overseas right now for the next 2 years, we probably would have packed our house and moved.
So,
and I think that that's an important part of the conversation.
It is, and I think that my point is to be in community conversations about all of these pieces of the puzzle. From the school district's perspective, we need to engage around how are we going to configure our schools based on the enrollment that we see for the next 1 to 3 years.
Yep.
There are
I don't
lots.
disagree with that.
No, I know there are lots of options. I don't want to make any assumptions. I think the community needs to be engaged in what does it look like? What does it mean? What do we want to do? How do we want to configure our schools? You know, it's amazing to me. Well, anyway, I just think getting ourselves involved in the conversations around different aspects of our community. Again, being at the table, if Goosefoot, for example, puts together a housing, or at least initiates a housing coalition, I asked to be invited to those meetings so that we have a seat at the table. And I want those reciprocal kinds of relationships. You know, if the district needs to be engaged in conversations around these things. But we also need the community engaged with the district around how do you want to see your schools configured? What do we need to do? Because we will continue in this mode, not because we're not doing something well, but because the population isn't there. So how do we configure our schools until the population is there? That changes.
I'd like to just add, I really appreciate, Dr. Moshe, that you're bringing this to our attention. And Director Downs, I appreciate the additional layer of complexity that the lack of early childcare offers up in our community. And I think it dovetails really nicely with the presentation that was made earlier this evening by Mr. Gordon, just because we should be in consideration as a district around what resources do we have, and that could come in the form of buildings and properties, but also in the form of administrators and leverage and relationships. And to really take a holistic view of what would support our district's families to be well and to be secure and to be able to stay here and receive the quality of education that we want our students to experience. So I'm just appreciative of everybody who's added something to this conversation. And I think it would be a really rich ongoing discussion around what's the long arc of the school district's potential to participate in a widespread community wellness campaign, meaning having all basic needs met, the foundational needs that come into the life of a person before they even reach school age, like having a roof over one's head and parents who can work and support the family.
So I bring this to you so that I can find out whether the board wants the superintendent to spend the time that the superintendent has in this way, because it impacts the work of the district. And so you don't have to decide now. It's just, I want it on your radar because I think we really need to look in earnest about how we're going to use our facilities over the next few years.
Well, and I want to express some appreciation for the fact that we're looking beyond the next step. That when I came on board as board chair, I was scrambling to make sure I got everything I needed for the next meeting. And that in the time since then, we've been, okay, what do we need for the next stage of the pandemic? What do we need for the hopefully last stage of the pandemic? And now what do we need going forward through the next full year cycle? And then now we're starting to talk, what do we need for the next 1 to 3 years? What do we need after that? How can we take an active role in helping the community, including the students, their families, the staff, and the wider community? So I just want to say that I'm really happy that this board is this leadership team is at the point where we can start having those conversations that look out much further to chart a course without having to overcorrect to get where we're trying to go. I'd open it up, Joe or our student reps, anyone else who hasn't specifically spoken up. Anne.
I thank you. That was very informative. I definitely think that the conversation has to start about the best use for facilities. I think that's of importance, but fortunately, I don't have much to add. I won't be here much longer, so.
Got a little senioritis.
A little bit. I think, you know, I'm seeing that, okay, maybe there'll be committees that look at this. Maybe we'll look at this and this and this. And then I remember I can't participate in any of that because you know, so
And that's not entirely,
regrettably, I think my my involvement in whatever processes come next might be more limited than I wish.
I'd like to challenge that a little bit and say that if we're starting to talk community conversations in August, if it's early August, you'll still be here. You could participate as a member of the community. Yeah, just putting that out there.
We are so engaging.
Yeah, if you want to spend more time hanging out with us. So yeah, I think that this is a really, oh, sorry, Joe, you've got your mic on,
Yeah,
so.
I just wanted to plus one to what everyone said, and I think there's sort of some trends that are coinciding that make me optimistic that we're going to move from a defensive posture around protecting the most vulnerable during the pandemic, and now we can kind of play offense and take a look at, if we could build a district from scratch, what would it look like? And we're not going to get there tomorrow, but if we start moving in that direction, we can get there in a few years or however long it takes. And I've been on teams before that are what I call small and mighty, and I don't see our declining enrollment as a problem. I think if we have a mindset of it being an opportunity to continue to meet students where they are, even though there's fewer of them, and to build a district that is excellent despite its size, I'm just really excited about the opportunity. So Dr. Moshe, I really appreciate you, framing it the way you did. That sort of calls us in to brainstorm, and envision a district that is, at its best, despite its size, or even because of its size.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I think anytime we can collaborate with the larger community and look at the whole child and the whole family, I think we're on the right track. So I would love to be able to spend some time with this, and I think it's worthwhile to collect that data and have those pieces at the ready when we're ready to have bigger conversations. And I hear Soul's graduating, but but I think it's important for kids because your class was one of the first classes impacted by the big changes between moving from Langley Middle School, moving that into a community center, and moving into the high school. Your, roses and thorns, if you will, around that process, that's important for us to know as we're having these bigger conversations. Because what might it look like as we create some, necessary upheaval to come to a better place in the end? So I look forward to your continued input in this process, my friend.
You reminded, I do have more to say, actually. Now that you brought up the middle school, one of my regrets is, and I do think the district, this is me speaking personally, I don't think there was as much student engagement as there could have been in that process. And I really hope that whatever processes come next, when we look at facilities, there is as much student engagement as is necessary and possible. And I mean that seriously. Like if I do have to stick around in August and put together a student committee to look at this, now you got me energized about this. It's very, very important that students have their input taken seriously on this.
This is something I'm really looking forward to having a community discussion with. And I also think it's important to recognize that the housing crisis doesn't just align with enrollment, but it also lies with inequity and poverty in our district that affects students who might still be living here and within our district, but are unable to have access to resources at home because of housing.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very, very important consideration in this as we're going forward and looking at how the district can engage with this. It's, yeah. Any other discussion? It sounds like we all think that Dr. Moshe spending time on this would be a very worthy investment of time and attention. I'm seeing nods around there. So I think you have your answer there. Anything else for the superintendent's report? Okay, we'll move on to board comments or report. Anything from anyone? I just want to again plug our next meeting, the May 8th, discussing May 11th, discussing the role of students on the board and elevating student voice. And I would love to see students here to give that voice in how they'd like to see us listening to them and reaching out to them. So challenge to all those students I've met during my visits to the schools to, you want to have a say, come have a say. Yeah. See you then. This meeting is adjourned.